Welcome to Feminine Power Time, where wisdom, leadership, well-being meet. And welcome to this special season 8.5, the season of light. I'm Jennifer Alexander, your guest host for this season, which will run in June, July, and August. But whenever you're listening, trust that you're receiving this in the perfect season for you. Christine and I have curated the season of light for you with the intention of creating a space where you can come to stay light. And what do we mean when we say stay light? Well, it means to stay centered, calm, and clear, to be radiant, resilient, and rooted, even in the midst of the swirl of the outside world. And it gives us access to what we have agency over, and that is our cultivation of our own inner light, our radiance. So that's where staying light starts, internally, in our own radiance. And then from there, with that light, we have the agency around our voices, our choices, and our presence, all of which influence the people around us. And that influence is our personal leadership. It's how we use our voices, our choices, and our presence in big ways and small ways. It's who we show up as within every system that we're a part of. And it impacts all of our relationships, be they our families, our teams, our organizations, our community, even the people who we interact with in line at the grocery store. And reminder, it's not about being perfect and it's not about spiritual bypassing. We must acknowledge that we're humans and that we're going to experience the wobbles, as Christine says. No one can expect to maintain some high level of vibrational consciousness 24/7. But what we can do is practice awareness and utilize our tools and practices to come back to our light, even when we get wobbly, so that we can show up differently for ourselves and for those around us. This is personal leadership. So, in the first two episodes of this season, we've been exploring radiance, both what sustains and what drains and dims our radiance. If you haven't tuned into those episodes yet, I invite you to have a listen. And in today's episode, we have a special guest, Christine's partner, Noah Martin. Noah has many, many gifts, and one of which is that he's a master in working with energy, and specifically clearing, cleansing, and restoring one's energetic frequency. So together, Christine and Noah will be conversating on the inquiry, what to do when you get gooped. Yes, I said gooped. And yes, that's a very technical term. But I'll let Christine and Noah give you their definitions of it here in a moment. First, I'd like to share a little story about how this concept of gooping came up recently in my own life. Several weeks ago, and while we were just beginning to curate this episode, a dear friend reached out via text because she was having a really hard day. And now this is an example of how we wise beings can cultivate our web of support for each other. Over the years, well, more than a decade actually, this friend and I have created a sacred, alchemical space for transformation in our text thread. So it's a space we can access when we need support in challenging times. So anyway, my friend had experienced some energy from a number of people that day, and not in person even. But she is a highly sensitive person, so she easily absorbs the energy of others. Anyone else out there feel that way too sometimes? I certainly do too. So after we've messaged back and forth and sort of processed and transmuted the energy, she asked me, "Do you have any intuition of what happened to me today?" And I answered, "Well, it sounds like you got gooped." She hadn't heard of the term, so I immediately sent her the podcast that we're going to be tuning into today. And that reminded me of when I first listened to this episode back in the summer of 2022. I had never heard the term gooped either, but boy, had I experienced being gooped. And to hear Christine and Noah discuss it was transformational for me. I felt seen, and I had a new awareness of my own energy and the energy swirling around me. And through the discussion, I received tools and practices to support me in degooping myself. And that's what I love about this episode, is that it's chock full of simple practices, tools, and resources for staying light, which, in the context of today's topic, what to do when you get gooped, are all about both degooping after the fact and also preventative practices to strengthen and protect your energetic field. I'm super excited to share this one with you all today. Here are Christine and Noah.
Hello and welcome to Feminine Power Time. This is Christine Narilo, your host, and today we are going to dive into this question. What do you do when you get gooped? And what do I mean by gooped? Well, you're going to find out today. You know what it means. You've had the experience when you get that emotionally globbiness, stuck on you from someone else, or you feel weighed down by the weight of the world, or swirled up and twirled up, and or just like, oh, not yourself. And so gooped is a very technical term, term that my partner Noah Martin and I came up with to describe what happens when we feel like this. And so today I have a really special guest for you all. My partner Noah Martin is going to be joining us today because he is the person I go to when I get gooped, in those moments when I feel not myself, in the moments when the world has just, taken root inside of my heart or my mind or my being, or I feel like I've been globbed by CNN, or I've been globbed by an interaction or an environment that I've been in, or even through my own things that I get triggered within myself. Noah is often the person that I sit with. He and I have been on a journey together. We have known each other for since 2001, and we have been on a journey of exploring many different kinds of modalities that so many different wisdom traditions offer us for these intense times that we just didn't learn in business school or in any of our education. We had to get it outside of the traditional systems. And Noah is actually the person who taught me a lot about this early on. I can remember our third date. We were at a wine bar in Chicago, and he's like, "Hey, Christine, you want to play energy balls with me?" And I'm like, "Is it like a game like on the shelf?" Because it was like one of those bars that have like Yahtzee and all these different games on the shelf. And Noah's now like, "No, it's like Tai Chi." And I'm like, okay, kind of heard of Tai Chi. Don't really know what energy balls are and what energy is. And maybe you'll talk to us a little bit about that today. And that is really what we do here at Feminine Power Time, is we go beyond the traditional, beyond the conventional, to really get into the wisdom so that you and I, so that we can really navigate these transformational times in a way in which we stay centered, we stay clear, we stay on our path, on our mission, and as grounded and rooted as possible, so that as we do pop out the other side, which we will, we can get through this time as unscathed as possible and really contributing our gifts and our genius and our insight to the world. All right, everybody. So let's just close our eyes and take a deep breath. We're going to welcome Noah in here in just a moment. But I just want to invite you to go ahead and press pause on the outside world and come into this space that we do currently every other week. Just root down and allow yourself to be here for yourself now. We are going to start today with this inquiry of like, what does it actually mean to get gooped? How do you know? And then we're going to move into 3 different parts. How does it happen? And we're going to go deep into how you can start making some different choices in the moment. We're going to talk about prevention and how to prevent getting gooped by the world. And then we're going to talk about what do you do like when you've already been gooped to get ungooped. So without further ado, Noah Martin, I'd love to invite you in here to join us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Christine, thank you for having me. It is really an amazing thing to get to share your audience with you, to have the experience of getting to be in this intimate connection where we talk about the things that weigh us down sometimes, especially when we don't know what it is.
Right? Because did we get the class on what 101 energetic interference? Yeah, there's energetic interference. 2, what do you do when you walk into the airport, or you walk into IKEA, or you walk into a place and you're like, God, the energy just doesn't feel good here. So Noah, for those of you that don't know, has been trained in lots of different modalities, a lot of energy modalities. He has his master's degree in spiritual psychology. So he really gets that mind, body, spirit, heart connection. And so he doesn't think exactly like I do. In fact, just even getting ready for this podcast today took us a little bit. We're trying a new software today so that we can kind of explore doing more of these together. And Noah, we almost got gooped.
Well, we almost gooped each other, which is really a lot of fun.
We were like, our egos were like, I'm going to throw some goop on you. I'm going to throw some goop on you. But we managed to get through the creative conflict, and now here we are using this new platform called Riverside. Well, hopefully it'll work. We don't know. And maybe let's start there, Noah. Like, let's just set the bar for everyone. What do we mean by being gooped? And how do you know that it's happened?
Well, gooped is sort of a general term we use to just talk about any time we feel as if we are off because of things outside of ourselves. So it can be like the place where I feel most gooped most consistently is in the TSA line at the airport, where you're waiting to go through the magnetic scanners to make sure that you're not bringing, I don't know, bombs onto the plane or whatever, which is all a lovely thing. But the anxiety and the energy as people are trying to get to their planes, and you're in this field, and like it just feels heavy for me. Usually there's a feeling of heaviness. Sometimes you might think of it like if you think about like from an aerodynamic perspective, it feels like drag. It's just like this energy that is making it uphill both ways.
And for me, I notice it two places the most. One is when I might be talking with somebody. This doesn't really happen a lot, but this is used to happen more than it happens now. Is like when you're talking to somebody and all of a sudden, like you can feel like your energy is waning because their energy is getting heavier and it's like you're taking it on. So it kind of feels like in whether it's like a group of people or it's an individual reaction where either it kind of like feels like you're getting heavy or you're also starting to kind of spin up. That can happen a lot. And I know also for me, usually the biggest gooping I get these days is when there's just a lot going on in the world. And I have my hand on my heart, you all, right now, and like it's just too much. It's like that we've talked about the sacred rage, holy grief, and something will happen, whether it is like Roe v. Wade being overturned or it's another school shooting or it's the war in Ukraine or whatever, whatever it might be. And there's something like where I tap into that collective, and it might not even happen like that same day. Like it might be days later when all of a sudden I feel all this grief or I feel all this rage or I feel like almost like it feels to me like I have a wet blanket on me. And it makes me like I start to lose my clarity. I start to lose my momentum. My negative mind starts to kind of be more active. Like I noticed this in the last couple of weeks. My negative mind is like, well, why even try? Why even try? It's not going to work anyway. And I was like, oh my God, whose thought is that? Where did that come from? And at some level, it's my thought, but it's being exacerbated by the despair in the world. And so those are some of the ways like you're not yourself, and you feel, the word I would use would be affected.
Well, it's also like this amplification of any personal negativity is another way of thinking about it. So like when it's like when you used to in the 90s, like rap groups would have a hype man. They'd have this person who would just sort of say yeah after you say a certain thing, and it's like you have your own personal negativity hype man who is just amplifying any negativity you have either about the world or about yourself or about possibility. And that is how you know you're gooped, is when all of the things, all of your negative mind or your negativity is amplified beyond your own actual energy. It's like a negative cycle is just amplified. That is the main thing. And the other main thing is that heaviness. Heaviness is a real sign that you've been gooped.
And I love that we use the term gooped because I think it makes it like, if you think about what color is goop to you? Like what's the consistency of goop? It reminds me of those. Do you all remember those game shows like back in the 90s where they would, like a Nickelodeon, and they would throw like the green goop at each other? Like that's what it kind of feels like. You have a blob on top of you. And this is all really real. So it's like, this is the thing, the reason why we use the word gooped, because it's not too woo woo and it's not too scientific. It actually is like very human and we can kind of understand it. But there are some, and in our esoteric training that Noah and I have been through, this is like things that the yogis and the the mystics and the shamans have been, they know about this. They've been talking about it and teaching about it forever. But, in the Western kind of mindset is like, if you can't see it, then it's not real. Or if you can't measure it, then it's not real. So, in the current culture, it's like, well, if you just meditated a little bit more, or, you just, dot, 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 or maybe, it's like, if we don't actually start talking about this goopingness, it's like the strategies that the conventional world is meeting them with only kind of keep us at the surface level. And even if you clear the goop, so sometimes you'll go and you'll like feel better and you'll clear the goop will come back again. And so there's two terms as we go into, as we deepen in this conversation that we felt like we needed to define for you all. And there's a lot of different levels that we could go to in this conversation. We're going to be together for just about an hour. As you know, like I'm doing these podcasts every other week this summer because I needed some space, but also so we could just go deeper into each of these topics. And there's a lot more we could talk about, but there are two particular kind of, this is the education piece, the esoteric education piece, that I thought were important to define before we kind of start to break down the different ways. And there's like 5 or 6 different ways we will get gooped. So Noah, let's talk about Akka and let's talk about the magnetic field. So you talk about Akka, I'll talk about the magnetic field. And you all just kind of zone in. Some of you may know this already, or just intuitively feel it already. But in these are 2 words we want to start using in our daily vocabulary.
So, our Hawaiian shamanic teacher, Mark, talked to us about Akka. And Akka is just the energetic connection between 2 living beings or more, or a field of living beings. And that can be, honestly, between 2 humans. It can be between a human and a tree. It can be between a group of humans. It can be a lot of different things, but it is the energetic connections that are constantly happening, and we're creating and recreating, and sometimes we're breaking and then recreating. So it's just the energy between living beings.
And that Akka, and is Akka is ACCA? That's how I spell it, or is it AKKA? I spell it ACCA. Do you know which way it's spelled, Noah?
Well, it was an oral tradition, so I'm not sure there's actually a spelling for it, and it was
Yeah.
because it's a Hawaiian term. I'm guessing K.
Okay, so either AKKA or ACCA, or maybe you all know how to spell it, but it's called Akka. And think of it like, I always think of it like umbilical cords between 2 people. So it's like if you're having a conversation with somebody else and you start to feel that heaviness, or you start to pick up that anxiety, or you start to pick up the worry or the frustration, it's like it's coming between those 2 that umbilical cord, that energy cord. But we can also do it with a group of people, right? Or to a collective of people is
Well,
what
it
you're
can be
saying.
so sometimes you'll have Akka, like let's just say like with a job or like your role. You can have an energetic connection with a position that can hold you in place and make it hard to shift out of that position because there's a longing to maintain the Akka. But it can also be between a group, like a church. And you can have a energetic relationship not just with the individuals in the church, but also the collection of the church. And, or a group of
Hmm.
friends, or whatever, all those sorts of groups. There is both the energy of the group and there's the individuals in the group.
And that also happens in family systems, right? So we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we get to the emergency care types of things that you can put into place to not get gooped. But there is Akka between people in what they call family constellations.
Absolutely, there is both the family that you actually have and also the family that sort of lives in your head. So even when you separate yourself physically from your relatives, you may find that there is still some version of your mother talking to you in your head, or some version of your brother talking to you, even as you are not in that interaction anymore. You may still have that internal conversation or the energetic conversation of all the ways in which the dynamics that were set up, and that's basically called a family constellation, which is essentially a complex Akka system.
Yes. So kind of just noting and starting to realize kind of what we're saying is like you have Akka in between people, other individuals. You have Akka within constellations. You have Akka, you can have Akka to the job, the community, the people that you work with, and being like, okay, what Christina and Noah are sharing here is like we have these energetic connections, but you can't see them with your eyes, but you can feel them. Right. And all the things we said of like how it could also feel really good too. It doesn't have to be like, Akka doesn't have to be, oh my God, this is draining me. Akka can really be really enlightening, right? And so instead of getting gooped, it's actually really kind of generating energy for you. Would you say that's true, Noah?
Well, you can be, as you can have generative relationships, you can have generative akka. So the more connection you have to people that you find help you raise your energy versus draw your energy down, it is going to be supportive of you. And you can also be at choice as to how what energy you allow to come and go between you and other people. You can be at some level of choice about this, which is conversation we're moving into. But akka is not a necessarily good or bad thing. It's just the way it works.
Yes. Yeah. And this is often like in relationship theory, like, so Noah and I have Akka chords between us. And oftentimes, if you think of someone in your life who maybe not be reacting or acting the way you would like them to be, in that Akka exchange, if you're projecting your own wound, your own, fear, your own whatever into the space, you're going to get that back. So just like Noah and I were working through just very simple thing, right? Is like what podcasting platform are we going to use, because we haven't been doing podcasts recently, and I didn't want to use the old way. He was resistant to trying a new system we hadn't worked. So we were in that moment where we're going to put blame or resistance into the system, which we both did. And then we kind of retracted and recentered ourselves. And so just knowing this, like we have these exchanges with these other groups even, and you can't change the other group. You can't change what's on the other side of the Akka chord. You can only be responsible for what your part is. And that's kind of where I think we'll wait to do magnetic field, Noah, until we go to the prevention, because that'll make more sense. Or should I talk about magnetic
I
field
think we should come
first?
back to magnetic field when we go into the prevention piece.
Okay, great. Well, then let's go into this part around boundaries. So this piece. Okay, what do you do when you get gooped? And we're talking about like, what does it mean? How do you know? How does it happen? And there's these times in your life, today, tomorrow, the rest of your life, where in the moment you are being impacted by energy outside of you that connects with energy within you. And what we want to kind of dive into here is like, how do you start to become aware of that so that in the moment you are making choices that keep you centered and sustained and clear and rooted in yourself, still in connection without taking it all on. So I'm gonna name the kind of we'll know what I'm gonna name the yeah. So no? Why don't you talk a little bit about boundaries here, and then I'll talk about the different kinds of boundaries, and then we can kind of circle
Well, the
around
reason
that.
why boundaries is part of like the choice in the moment is that boundaries are essentially choices that we make about how we're going to interact with something. It isn't necessarily like, let's say you go to, I don't know, your local coffee shop and you get in line and the person in front of you ends up being very rude to the cashier or the barista or whatever. And you're now standing behind them and it brings up stuff for you because you just don't, who wants to hang out with, be around people who are being negative, and then you have to interact with the teller after they just had this terrible experience, and you're just like, you just have to sort of decide what's the energetic exchange I'm open to here. How do I set my energy field so I'm taking in things or not? So you get to be at choice, like, okay, this person is behaving in a way that you're not enjoying, but that you don't know them. You get to be at choice as how you're going to enter that field. The field exists, and you get to make a choice as to how you enter it. And that's where boundaries come in. What am I letting in and what am I not letting in?
Well, and so I know, so I think that is where it's important to understand you all that we have a magnetic field. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. 'Cause I think we have to talk about it, Noah, in order for us to understand boundaries. So for those of you who have read Overwhelmed and Over It, in section 2 of Overwhelmed and Over It, I go into this in not great detail, but great enough detail to understand that you have what sometimes I like to call the Glenda the Good Witch bubble around you. Everyone go ahead and just put your hands out to the sides and just kind of twinkle your fingers. I mean, really, you have to do this. This is like when Noah played energy ball games with me in the bar, and he's like doing this with me. I'm like, I don't want to, move my body, but you have to be able to feel and sense this energetic body. So if you just close your eyes, if you can, and keep your hands spread out to the side, and then like just raise your hands really slowly and up to the top. So it's like if you were Glenda the Good Witch from Wizard of Oz, this is your energy bubble. And as you become more energetically sensitive and you move them slowly, and right now my hands are tingling, you will actually start to feel the energy that's around you. Sometimes this is called the auric field, and then it gets woo-wooed and poo-pooed. In yogic philosophy, it's called the magnetic field. And what's it called in Tai Chi and Qigong, Noah?
You can refer to it as your Wei Qi, which is sort of the Qi that meets the world.
And so this magnetic field, it's like imagine all of us have these bubbles, right, that we're walking around in. And those bubbles create energetic boundaries, emotional boundaries, mental boundaries, energetic boundaries, physical boundaries. And that's a good thing, right? Like it's healthy. It's just like you put clothes on every day so that you don't just like, go sit on the public bus and naked, right? You put clothing on. So your magnetic field, this energetic force field is healthy boundaries, and we bump into each other, we can cross over into each other. It's kind of like if you've ever stood in line like the barista and you can feel someone walking up behind you. It's because now your energy fields are touching, and sometimes, especially if you're empathic, you can merge with them, and now your magnetic field has been infiltrated, and your magnetic field, and you're picking on the emotions, the thoughts, the energy of other people, either individually or collective. So everyone just take a breath and just kind of think about like a situation in your life currently where you might have touched someone else's energy bubble, or that magnetic field, or they might have merged, or even like I was at Pottery a couple of weeks ago having a conversation about, I don't remember what we were talking about. Oh, we were talking about women and, getting pregnant and having babies and age and all of this. And I put something into the conversation, and it was met with resistance. And it kind of like felt like my energy and consciousness bubble like hit their energy consciousness bubble, and there was no opening and to a different conversation. And so instead of like pushing that forward, I just retracted my energy and like, yeah, this energy isn't welcome here, and went back to just talking about pottery, which was because I didn't want to get gooped or goop anyone else. And so, no, I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about the physical part of these boundaries and the Wu Qi, so Wei Qi. And one of the ways that we get gooped when our magnetic field is weak and it's not super strong, and how we can end up picking up stuff because that physical Wu Qi, Wei Qi. There's so many woos and cheese, I get confused. No. I mean, in our family, I am the one who went deep in yogic philosophy, and Noah, I think you were born a Taoist, but you have gone very deep in that methodology. So tell us a little bit about it from that perspective.
I'm just gonna start with yes, it is Wei Qi, which is just the energy or your. So Qi is energy, so it's just where your Qi it meets the world. That's the Wei Qi. It's the interaction with the world. And if your Wei Qi is strong, you just let less. You can let less into you when you're centered and you feel strong, and your Wei Qi is strong, and that just helps you navigate anything. So like you can be in a place that is, let's say, dark or dank or smelly or somehow unpleasant to you, and it can be an unpleasant physical experience for you, and you can choose to move through it without taking anything on from the space. You can simply be at choice, like, oh, this is happening, but I am not taking this on. That is essentially what a boundary is of any kind, is that something can happen without you needing to take it on personally. So sometimes that is being in a place where you don't really want to be because it's not the physical environment you want, and be like, okay, this is just happening, whether it's feels unsafe, or it is somehow not beautiful, or that there are just too many people there. You can just be a choice. Oh, this is happening, but I am not taking all of this on. And that is sort of talking about at a physical level is you can sort of set the intention that your Wei Qi is strong to meet that energy. Or you can think of it as your aura. Your aura and your Wei Qi are similar in conceptually.
And it's kind of like the visual that comes like, I'm going to plump up my Wei Qi. And so you can be present like in the moment without your energy field being compromised, right? And but if you're going into the situation and your physical energies, like say you feel drained, you feel not radiant, you're just kind of depleted, that is where like in like your immune system in the kind of that would be one language, your immune system would be lower. Your and that then gets into your field. So that's not the time to go to a big concert, or it's not the time to go to a place that's going to be emotionally draining. Like if you really, when you spend time with your relatives, it's emotionally draining, and your Wu Qi, Wei Qi, is low. No, you don't want to go because you don't have the stamina, you don't have the resiliency, and that's why we did the 2 series before this. Is like what strengthens your radiance, what lowers your radiance, because your radiance is that light, and that light is what surrounds that magnetic field. It's what protects that magnetic field, so you don't have to walk around being like, I have to protect my magnetic field, I have to protect my magnetic field. It by itself is strong. And part of the reason so many of us don't have strong magnetic fields is because, again, did you get taught this? Like, even if you do regular, everyday, yoga, certain kinds of yoga isn't necessarily going to totally, keep that magnetic field strong. There's certain kinds of yogic practices that do. And so that's where we're just like bringing in this conversation, because we are in such intense times that no one, that not no one, but well, kind of, I'll just say no one. It's like we need this. This is why the yogis came to the West, and this is why all this wisdom is starting to come back that's been here, because it's what we need for this time. So maybe just one of the things that Noah does for me, and why we do the life force receiving practice every morning. So for those of you that don't know this, again, please read chapter or section 2 and Overwhelmed and Over It. There's a practice called the life force receiving practice, and where you check in on your life force every day on a scale of 0 to 100. So if my life force is below 65, I know that my woo, my physical, my way, I'm not as protected. I'm not as strong. So I don't want to go be where there's a lot of people at. Like this was like yesterday, but I didn't want to go where there was a lot of people. My nervous system just couldn't handle it, and it just was not the place. So we went out to the country, visited Noah's sister for 2 hours, came home. I watched some pottery videos because they fluff up my spirit. And just to know that about yourself. And this is where we kind of go beyond, oh, I need to do self-care, and oh, I need to rest and get sleep, which is all part of it. But it's like, oh, I have this energetic system that I want to make sure is strong, and based on its strength, it shifts how you are in the world and the environments that you put yourself into.
So, Christine, I would like to now talk about emotional boundaries, because this is the thing that I think most goobers people up, or has the most chance to get them gooped. It is actually when you are not conscious about your emotional experience, when you're letting too much emotional energy cross that ACA back and forth between you and either the world, or you and some individual or some group. That is the most likely time for you to feel like you have a wet blanket on. It's so strong it slammed Christine's door there.
It did. Whoosh. Probably because I've been feeling a lot of that emotional goopiness the last couple of weeks myself.
So the thing is that this is actually the place where you have the most choice, and the place where you're also likely to be most affected. So a sizable number of your listeners, Christine, are likely energetically and emotionally empathic. They actually like to care about the world. And sometimes they take too much of it on, and it weighs them down and keeps them from going out into the world in a good way. It makes them feel heavy and drained. And sometimes even despondent, because it's like, oh no, what can we do? And when you get into that perspective, you get into that energy. And I will tell all of you a secret. Noah's least favorite conversations with Christine are the ones in which she is in despair about the world. Because it's like, no, you can't change the world in a second. You can do what you can do right now. And that's a really important sort of perspective to hold is, hey, I am not the emotional sponge for the universe for all its negativity. I will not do that. I'm going to be aware of things without taking it on personally. That is an actual choice you get to make. And you can think of it as your Wei Chi is helping you with this or your magnetic field, but it's really just a choice. Boundaries, generally speaking, are choices.
So let's just take a little breath here as we're like about halfway through. I think it's a really good golden thing to underline. Boundaries are choices. And so this is really an invitation for all of us to become more aware of how we are being affected or impacted by the environment around us and what we're choosing to interact with. And this is kind of like, if you're going to go out on a trek for 40 days through the desert, you need to bring water. There's a certain environment you're going into, so you prepare. We are in and are continuing to head into this time on the planet of massive transformation, deconstruction, where polarization is even more prevalent, where it seems like we could be living in two different worlds, where more people's emotions are just flying all over the place. And so if we don't go into this time just knowing, okay, this is a level of intensity of emotion, mental, like just information coming at us, news coming at us, energies. So you walk into the airport, you walk into any space, just knowing that they all have a frequency and that our own, immune systems and, even when we don't feel, when our emotions are heavy, it affects our physical immunity. When we are mentally not feeling like calm and centered and content on the inside, all of these systems are connected. So I just want to invite everyone to take a moment and know that no one here has done anything wrong. And we have all had the tools that we have. And even if you're like, Noah and I have been studying this for 20 years, I have a dedicated daily practice. I have a weekly practice. I have so many practices that hold me. I get gooped. And it's part of why we also be in community. So it's like, and we put some proactive things into place, which we'll talk about as we complete. But just one thing that I'll offer to all of you is back in 2020, in March of 2020, Noah and I created a series in a thing called Stay Harmonized. And there are a series of practices that we taught over the course of several weeks, just be a place where people could come and get their frequency attuned. And there was a series of 6 that teaches some of these things that we're talking about. It's like, what do you do to actually strengthen your wu wei? What do you do wu qi, wei qi, wei qi? What do you do to strengthen that magnetic field? And if you go to stayharmonized.com, you can still get all of those recordings. And there are some of the practices that I continue to use that help those boundaries stay strong, which is one of the things as we kind of move here into prevention you want to do. So that's kind of just to make a little note of that. We'll put this in the show notes. But as we kind of talk about this emotional, so boundaries, just underlining this, mental boundaries, what are you letting in from yourself or the outside? Emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, energetic boundaries, and how that all shows up in all the different environments. And so so Noah and I kind of sat down and said, okay, what are some practices we can give you? So when you feel gooped, here's mine, and then Noah, you can put yours in there. The question is to slow down and ask yourself, what of this is mine? What of this is mine? Because there's something that basically the wisdom teaching is there's, a lot of stuff, crazy, darker, heavier stuff floating around. It can't get into your field emotionally, mentally, physically, psychically, if there's not already something in your field that allows it to get in or that attaches to it. And so you just can ask that question, what of this is mine? And then it might be a piece of fear, it might be a piece of worry, it might be some frustration, it might be your own scarcity thinking. And then you get to work with that. You get to transmute that. That's where your power is. And then release the rest. And then what happens is you stop projecting your goop, your own inner goop, into the field. And then all that outer goop, it can't get in there. So there are like things that happen in the world that even though they may be disturbing, they can't goop me up the way that other things can goop me up. Well, like when I look at what goes on in the housing market right now, because at some level that affects my capacity about my housing choices. And whenever something threatens my perceived threat of me not being at choice, that will goop me up. And I'll get spun up and I'll start going onto Zillow and I'll start looking at CNN, which then goes into my mental mind, which then starts to create the negative mind, which then affects the emotional part of I'm never going to get what I want. And then it's just all downhill from there. And then all of a sudden I have to have a degooping session with Noah. Does that sound about right, Noah?
That does sound vaguely familiar. I have experienced that particular cycle,
Just being honest.
that specific cycle. So I think when you get to that place where you find yourself, you're in some goopy behavior, or you're in some sort of cycle you can't break. I think the next question to ask is, what supports me? What way can I be with that is supportive to me? So it isn't like I'm telling you to shut off everything that's negative from your life and pretend like it doesn't exist, because it does exist. Things that are challenges are here and they exist. It is, how can I be with that that is supportive to me? So I can make the right choice for me, so I can make the right movement for me, so that I don't get weighed down by it. What allows me
Mm. Yeah, because there's a,
to be supported in this?
mm. Well, I love that because, I would imagine if you all just take a moment and this kind of starts to move us into prevention, is that to take a pause and take a look at the environments and the situations where the gooping kind of continues to happen. Because this is the piece, like it's like whatever those pieces are inside of us that have the fear or the wobbles or the insecurities or the places where our egos want to go into overdrive, like that's how that stuff infiltrates. So one of the things you can do is you can look at where you continue to get gooped. And this is really what we're going to ask you all to do, is to look at where these circumstances keep happening at, because that's when we can actually start to identify that and start to make changes. Like, so I'm thinking of one of my clients who works in an environment that just continually frustrates her. And the person she works with continually frustrates her. Then she keeps talking about this person and what's wrong with him and what's wrong with everything. And so she's living, it creates this environment of frustration when what she wants to be working in is collaboration and joy and teamwork. And so that for her is a sign of like, how does that grab onto her? What within her keeps her going back to that same environment and expecting it to be different? And this is part of the prevention piece of just starting to become aware of what we're not aware of. And I know, Noah, you said that. I loved you pulled a quote from Benjamin Franklin about prevention and how we can prevent the gooping from
So
happening.
an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That is the quote from Benjamin Franklin. In this case, what that means is, if you know every time you go to some specific place or interact with some specific person, you end up being drained or gooped or whatever your word for it is, here's my advice: don't do that. Now, sometimes you don't have a short term choice about it. Maybe it's your job or it's your relatives or whatever. But you then set yourself up so in the long term, you don't keep doing it. So if you have a job where you go to and it's draining to you every day, it is actually important that you go find either a way to change that job so that's not true, or change jobs. If you have some particular relative that is really challenging for you to deal with, it is actually for you to either have a conversation with them about what it is to interact with them and how it drains you, find a way to relate to them differently or spend less time with them. It's not really like these are like find a way to reduce the interaction that is creating that gooping.
Well, and also this is the piece where people I think fall down at is the self-honesty part. Because there's a part of you that we do this, right? Like we even in our relationship, Noah, like we can trigger each other when, especially like for me, when I don't want to have to be with what is going on within me, I will project it onto you. My, the parts of me I don't want to be with, I just would rather my inner mean girl's like, I'll just go find those over there in Noah and we'll nitpick on him. And are you familiar
I
with
will let
this,
you all
Noah?
know this is a great time. When it is all I ever want to do is be picked on for the things that she doesn't like about her that I am doing. And it is fantastic. I recommend we all do this more. No, maybe not. So, and the thing is that the fantastic thing about Christine is I can tell her that, and she will go, "Oh, I am doing that," and then she'll shift in her perspective and her energy, which is amazing. And not everyone can do that, but it is actually an important conversation. If there's something that's happening in your life where you have that interaction that's not working for you, let them know. Take a new choice about it. Now, not everyone is emotionally responsible about that and make good choices, but give them the opportunity.
But that's where people, will tell you who they are. And I think this is one of the reasons we continue to get gooped and gooped and goop, especially in relationships or situations, is because we try to change that person, or we keep thinking they're going to change, or we let 10% be better, and then we're surprised that the same thing happens again. And so, for me, I think about this in terms of like friendships, for example, that are with really beautiful humans, but the friendships aren't the same and there's more of a distance. And so, like, when I reach out and that person doesn't reach out, or I can't feel their energy, that will like trigger my own abandonment or loneliness love crack. And therefore, then if I let that like kind of move out, if I let that activate, then I will get gooped. So instead, I change my expectations. And then I also am honest with who that person is and what that situation is now. And so I think this is like this piece, right? Part of our thing with feminine power time is like, look where your power is and focus there. And even like, I just think about my relationship with my mother, which is like, if you think of your parents, it's one of the most places we can get gooped at, is it's neutral. There's a neutrality to it because I'm no longer looking for her what she can't give me. I don't think she's looking for me what I can't give her. And so when we actually are in connection, there's a neutrality. Now that took me 10 years of internal work to get to, but it started by noticing that aka between the two. And so that is, I think, just that's the beginning of that prevention piece, that looking at where it's happening, and instead of keep going back and back and back and expecting it to be different, it's not like you have to just like cut the cord and run, but to be honest and start to make a shift out of that. And then stop. I always say, don't bite the fish hook. So like if you think about your magnetic field and like someone wants to, whether it's someone you work with or a relationship or whatever, and Noah, you're really good at this. Like they throw the bait in, don't bite.
Yeah, I have to say it'd have to be a pretty attractive worm for me to want to bite into it at this point in my life. I'm not just gonna go after every little thing. It doesn't make sense. All right, Christine, I'd like to transition though, because sometimes you bite on the fish hook. Sometimes you are gooped. Sometimes you went to the place and it was actually draining, and you are heavy, like under a wet blanket. I want to talk about what do you do then?
Okay. Well, go right ahead.
Well, so I just
But wait, before you do,
oh,
before we
oh, okay, go ahead.
oh, hold on 1 second. The other part, I just want to mention this piece before we move into the last part, the third part, under prevention. You have heard me say this a gazillion times, but I'm going to say it again. How you start your day is paramount to creating a strong magnetic field, and that is about setting your field so that you're protected, you're connected, and you're harmonized. And I don't even know how to stop not being gooped if you don't have that. We've talked about that a lot. There's a whole section in Overwhelmed and Over It. in section 2, again, this is where it's at. Read it, learn about it, dive into it, go into the Stay Harmonized sessions. And also there's a special kit that I've created called dailyflowpractice.com. I've mentioned it before. I'll put a link in the show notes. That walks you through the concepts that are in that second chapter in the book. So if you have a question, that a daily morning practice that you are doing every day to set, connect, and protect your fields. And if you don't, you need one to just do. And then once you get the daily morning one, then you add on the evening downshifting. And once you get that one, then you do the same with your weeks. So start where you are and check out Overwhelmed and Over It and get more on that. So that's more that we're going to go into in this podcast. And there are other sessions on that. But in there are some great practices that I use myself. All right, Noah, so move us into this emergency care.
And stayharmonized.com will also give you some of those reset things too. So just keep that in mind. And it's a fantastic way to start your day clean so that you don't start the day with yesterday's yuck.
All right, so Noah, bring us into this last part of our conversation today about emergency care. What do we do when we're already gooped, right? So you're already swirled up, you already feel the heaviness, you're already triggered, you've bit on the frickin' fish hook, you are not yourself, you're not centered, and you are not clear. What do we do? I know you said something about, we were talking about this over breakfast, you're like, I think there's different things we do if we're introverts and extroverts.
No. Before that.
Okay.
Wait, before that, I have to say this. The thing that our Hawaiian shamanic teacher taught us was salt water helps dissolve the aka. And we didn't talk about this morning over breakfast, but I just want to bring this thing because this is true for everyone.
You want people to drink salt water?
No, not drink it.
I'm kidding.
Please don't drink
I'm
salt
being
water.
playful.
I know, but please don't do that because it's not good for you. If you have a bathtub, I want you to put yourself submerged in salt water. If you have the ocean available, that's even better, but most of us don't have the ocean outside of our front door. And if you don't have a bathtub, a salt scrub all over your body and then rinse off. And use it as the energy of just releasing that overconnection to the world. This is the best emergency care I can think of when you're feeling gooped.
You can also sleep with a bowl of salt water next to you. Also kind of takes away that negative energy too. I know it sounds simple, but it does work.
Well, if you do the salt water piece in the morning, after you slept overnight, you actually flush the toilet and pour it down the toilet so it doesn't stay in your house. You have to actually remove it from your house and then just wipe out the bowl and throw it away or whatever, but just to get the energy moving.
Yeah, because what we're talking about here, you all, this is happening at an energetic level, and you can't see it, but it is affecting you, and you know this in your nervous system, in your emotional system, in your mental system, and even in your physical system, and for sure in your psychic system. So these practices and these modalities, and there's so many of them, and some are going to work for some of you and some are not going to work for some of you. But what you just need to know is that when I'm gooped, I actually need to do something. I need to take action. So like for me, and also I'll share one of mine, is that I really, if I need to raise my frequency. So this is kind of true actually for most of us. So I will put myself into a situation where there are high conscious vibe people. This is one of the reasons why I run the Feminine Leadership Councils, why I run Feminine Wisdom Way, why I do all of these things that are gathering conscious women, why we do a monthly Stay Harmonized session every month in the Feminine Wisdom Cafe for all of the members there, because there are places for you to come and raise your frequency. And so that's more like preventative care. It's just there for you. But a lot of times, like just last Friday, I showed up with one of my Feminine Leadership Councils, and we were all feeling the heaviness of the world. And so we had that session already planned. And so by having this common place to come and be around other high vibration people really help lift us up and helps, kind of take off that goopiness. Or Noah and I went to see Michael Franti a couple of weeks ago, who's just like a magician of the de-goop. I mean, if that man doesn't know, I mean, he knows how to de-goop. And so it just lifted all of our frequencies up because there was just so much high vibration energy. So that's like something you can do in emergency care, but you also have to do the preventative care stuff, because if you just keep degooping yourself but not doing the preventative care, it's like you still have those energy leaks and that other stuff's going to come in. But that's one of the things I love to do. How about you, Noah? What's something that you really find helpful for you?
So I find for me a little bit of time by myself, either meditating or doing Tai Chi or doing a visualization, a guided visualization, I find really helpful for me when I'm feeling too much with the world. That is the reason why sometimes we get gooped is we just get overwhelmed by the world. And I personally need some introvert time, some time to really be by myself with just either a voice guiding me through a meditation or visualization, or just being in a sort of zen like meditation or a simple counting meditation, something that is not about interacting with anything but myself.
Mm.
I find that super helpful.
Yeah, I can find even like for me sometimes when I'm feeling gooped, I will go up and do one of the stay harmonized practices, which is called the harmony break, where I lay on my back and I have my head just a little bit up and my knees are up. And this practice is also on the Feminine Wisdom Cafe as well as in the Stay Harmonized practices. And I will just put one hand on my I mean, this is what qigong practice, right? Now, where you put your one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, and I'll breathe with the intention of just reconnecting with myself and reconnecting to what I would call the divine, and just letting everything else go so I can feel that place of centeredness and contentment. Like it's almost like kind of floating in a sensory deprivation tank, but one that you don't have to go, float in a bunch of water somewhere else. The bathtub is kind of like that too. And so I think what we're saying here, so these are like thinking of like what's the energetic support that you have in place and the modalities that you have in place and the practitioners you have in place, so that when you get gooped, because you are going to get gooped, it's like you want these things in place so that when the goop happens, you have things to reach out to. And so that's energetic support that comes in practices, that comes in connections to other people, that comes in practitioners. And really that helps you, what Noah and I were talking about this morning is like, what helps you claim and clear your own being? What supports you to clear, and what supports you to strengthen your internal system? What are those modalities for you? So Noah, just name a couple that work for you, and then I know that you're also really well practiced in.
Well, so for me, I find Qigong and Tai Chi to be the thing that is the most centering for me back into my own energy. It is the way in which I can be both connected to the sort of more cosmic energy and to myself without feeling compromised. I also really find, if it depends what I'm working with. If I'm working with like a traumatic experience that is just being re-triggered, I really find something called Seaborg Matrix or alternate integrative therapy, which is basically working with the chakras to release memories and traumas. I find that to be incredibly helpful for helping me get back to my center.
Mm. Mm. And that is, and that's actually a modality that Noah is trained in, and one that he uses with me a lot. And when Noah also does energetic, what do you call them? Harmonization sessions with people, mostly with the women that have been in my community, but you do that for other people as well. It's like an energetic harmonization.
I call it, I think I'm going to call it now degooping. I help you get clear about who you are separate from that which goops you. No, we call it just clearing sessions, just getting clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clearing. And so like just what we're saying is like you need people and practices that clear you, but also things that strengthen you. And there's like just the short-term stuff that kind of happens where you get gooped, but there's also like, because like we talked about at the very beginning, there's things that can get triggered in our own traumatic bodies, in our own memory systems. And so some of these things like EMDR, like CMORG matrix, which is now called
Alternate integrative theory or therapy, sorry, AIT, alternate integrative therapy.
family constellations is another great modality. And so you want to work with someone like a Noah or have someone like that in your sphere that has access and understands how all these energies work, so that when you do get gooped, you have someone that you can go to. It's kind of like having a dentist, right? Or having, anything. We need those people that can help us really keep our energy clear, and not just clear it, but also strengthen it. And then there's also the community. So that's practitioners. So just kind of think about, who are the practitioners that I have? It could be the body workers, the people who, not just are giving you like a massage that is like a muscle massage, but also know how to work with the energy bodies like craniosacral or Reiki or lots of different modalities. Who are those practitioners? For me, I have an acupuncturist and a massage therapist that I have in my regular rotation. So practitioners, who are those? 2, are you familiar with some of these more energetic modalities like EMDR or CMORG matrix or family constellations? And if you're not, start to open up to them and consider. Those are like, what I love about those modalities is like, you usually go in with a specific thing you're working with, and you know that it continues to show up, and you want to unhook it. You want to break through it. And so that's what those modalities do. And then there's these other practices that Noah and I are talking about. He has the kind of the more, traditional Chinese medicine, Qigong, Tai Chi, which are amazing. Whenever I'm super goopy, he makes me do, well, he invites me to do Qigong in the living room. And I stick my tongue out at him and I say, I don't want to. Because when we're gooped, it's the weirdest thing, right? Some part of us doesn't want to be ungooped.
That is the strangest thing, that when we are under the energetic influence of something that is heavy, we don't want to lighten up. It is the strangest thing, because everything we want is to be lighter, and yet we also don't want to lighten up. It is a contradiction, but it's a way in which you have to really be at choice. Oh, I'm going to choose this up leveling of energy, whether that is, again, going to a spiritual center and hanging out with people who are in a high vibration that is going to help lift you up. You actually have to make that choice to do it, the choice not to be gooped.
So just notice that, it's going to happen to all of us. Even I resist the lightness and resist the radiance. And as we, wrap this all up today, there's a couple. Oh, I also wanted to say, for me, I love yoga, pranayama specifically, kriya yoga. Those are really good for what we're talking about. And earthing, literally laying on the earth and getting connected to the earth and letting all of this stuff just whoosh, wash out of you. So those are practices. For some of you, even jogging might end up working, but find what works for you. And so I asked Noah, kind of in closing, so Noah has a podcast called Meditations by Noah, which has been on a little bit of a hiatus for the last couple of years, and he's coming back to it. And I asked him specifically to create a meditation for all of you. So Noah, do you want to just say a little bit about that so people know where to find that at?
The same place you found this podcast, you just go and you type in Meditations by Noah, and it should show up. And it is, the most recent one is called Ungoop. So it is very specifically a meditation for releasing any energy that isn't serving you right now.
So you can tune into that when you get gooped. And then for the preventative care, get the Overwhelmed and Over It book if you don't have it. If you do, go take a look at section 2. It goes into all of this. It's why it's the second section, because I don't even know how to get people out of overwhelm and burnout and into their clarity without these tools. So go ahead and take a look at that. Also, the Stay Harmonized sessions that we did in 2020 and 2021 are still completely valid. So if you go to stayharmonized.com, those are there for you. And then if you are not a member of the Feminine Wisdom Cafe, which is our private online community off of the social network, so it could be a high frequency place, come over to femininewisdomcafe.com. And that's how we're going to complete today. And I'm going to end with one, Noah, why don't you go ahead and end with one thing you would like everyone to just take with them and I'll take one action. So what's the elevation action for each of us as we go into this week and we end this particular series called Stay Light?
Hmm. Uh, I'm called just to tell everyone at some point in your morning, sometime before 10 a.m. your time, I would like you all just to take 10 deep breaths, just 10 belly breaths, just to be connected to the world. Just breathe in and breathe out. Breathing in the appropriate level of connection for you and breathing out that which does not serve. Just make something just that simple for yourself and try it for a week and see if it helps.
I like to do that in bed before I even get up. One of my favorite stay light practices. Thank you, Noah, and thank you for being here. We really appreciate you and all of the energy and wisdom that you bring and your patience today to get this working. And thank you all for your patience and being here with us. I'm going to add in the elevation action here is to look around and make sure you have those practices, practitioners, and communities that you can connect into that higher frequency, whether it's one that I'm convening or it's something else that happens or all of those. Do that, and do those, get those into place, and make all of those part of your rhythm. And just know that, remember that there's nothing wrong if you get gooped. It happens to the most practices of us. And this is where we can really lean into others. I know one of the things that lightens me up the most is reaching out to a sister and having a wise woman tea, or in the morning, Noah coming towards me and wanting to just give me love, and he's like giving me a big hug and noticing how I might even be resisting that, or just doing my pottery every week as a weekly shifter to make, remember, just get my hands on clay. So just know this is the way that we're living right now. And thank you for all of you that have been leaving reviews. I'm just loving them. It helps so more people find them. So thank you so much who are leaving those on iTunes. And more than anything, I'm just sending you all off with so much love. Just know who you are, and the way you choose to live and use your voices and your presence is making a difference. The more of us that can stay light during these times, the more we can make it through the turbulence and stay harmonized and help this world stay stabilized while we go through this change. So sending you off much love, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, wise beings, wasn't that fun? A huge thank you to Noah for joining the conversation today. I just love the buffet of tools and practices and resources that were so beautifully laid out for us in this episode. It's like decades of gathered wisdom all on one metaphorical table. And I'd like to invite you to come on over to the buffet and choose one practice that Christine and Noah talked about and commit to experimenting with it this next week. Because when we commit and devote ourselves to a practice, it works not only in the moment, but also cumulatively. It's like strength training for your physical body, but in this case, we're strengthening our energetic body, or really bodies, because there are multiple, but that's beyond the scope of today's conversation. The key is that as a practice, it's something we do over and over. We're practicing, so there's no destination, but rather a consistent devotion to cultivating our own inner peace and calm and clarity. We'll put a list and links to the practices in the show notes, and I'm going to recap some of what you'll find there. And I invite you, as I speak each one of these, to feel into your body and notice if any one practice calls to you. You might feel a tingling sensation or a spark, so just listen and feel and let the practice choose you. Okay, we have the Ungoop Meditation by Noah, the Morning Receiving Practice, Noah's 10 before 10 and deep breaths before 10 a.m., the Stay Harmonized Practice, and the Saltwater Bath or Bowl. And if none of those are lighting you up right now, then just come on over to the show notes for the full list. And then pick one and play. Experiment. And notice the difference in your energy. Regardless of which practice chooses you, I also invite you to observe your energy over the next week as you move through your days. Notice which environments and people stoke your radiance and which ones scoop it up. And remember, awareness is just the first step in shifting our unconscious patterns and liberating our life force. Another resource that I wanted to highlight for you is Christine's most recent book, Overwhelmed and Over It. This book is like the curriculum for cyclical living and creating lasting sustainability in life. So if you haven't gotten the book yet, check it out. You can find it wherever you prefer to do your book shopping. And the beautiful thing about it is that you don't have to read it cover to cover. You can dip in and out according to what you need most in the moment. Okay, wise beings, so between now and next time, the invitation is to play with one practice for what to do when you get gooped. And we'll share a post around this in the Feminine Wisdom Cafe on Mighty Networks. The link for that is in the show notes as well, so that you can come on over and be in community and share your experience. Christine and I are also available to connect there, and we love connecting, so you're invited. Join us. Another way to play with these practices is to share this podcast with a friend and then invite them to experiment with a practice with you. As you conversate together, you can share with each other what you're noticing in your daily life as you play with the practice. And then join us for the next episode in the Season of Light, which will be all about liberation, liberating ourselves from what no longer serves. Definitely tune in next week. I'm looking forward to being with you all again. Sending you all off with much love.